This is the CALeVIP Inland Counties Incentive Project pre-launch webinar. We're going to have a large group today, so we're actually going to get started at 10:05. This is the CALeVIP Inland Counties Incentive Project pre-launch webinar. We will start in 2 minutes at 10:05. Good morning. This is the CALeVIP Inland Counties Incentive Project, the pre-launch webinar. We're about to begin the webinar. Jane, next slide, please. My name is Peter Caldwell. I will be moderating the webinar today. I'll be joined by Andy, who will be taking us through the material today, and later Brian Frobel from the CEC will be joining us to answer the questions and answer some of the questions that are coming up. Next slide, please. Just before we get started, I want to remind everyone that you can submit your questions in the chat box. You can do that anytime throughout the presentation. We have a large group. We have over 200 people registered. So we do apologize if there are any technical difficulties. And so we apologize in advance if that does occur. This presentation and the material for the presentation will be sent out tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can contact us at the address listed on the screen. Next slide, please. Just a quick review of what we're going to cover today. Andy is going to cover the overview of CALeVIP, the project goals, and the funding. We're going to have more specific information around the Inland Counties Incentive Project, more specifically around key dates, funding by counties, applicants' requirements, etc. He will then cover off the eligibility and equipment requirements and walk people through the application process, and we will finish with a question and answer session. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Andy.
Thanks, Peter. Hello all, thank you for joining us today to go through CALeVIP's Inland County Incentive Project. I wanted to just start off with some of the main project goals of CALeVIP. First, CALeVIP is designed to implement targeted incentive projects at a regional scale throughout California. We're talking about one of those today. Putting those projects in place with mechanisms to streamline that application process and to get funding for electric vehicle charging into the market in a more rapid manner that will allow the various site hosts, property owners, electric vehicle charging companies, and service companies to provide convenient access to charging infrastructure, encouraging electrification across the state. Next slide, please. I just want to remind everybody that the funding for CALeVIP comes from the California Energy Commission through their Clean Transportation Program, and the source funding of that was extended through 2024 by California Assembly Bill 8. That funding amount does vary annually and is set out within the Clean Transportation Program's investment plan. Next slide, please. So I think what everybody's here to hear about today is the Inland Counties Incentive Project. So we're going to dive right into that, starting with the basics on that. The Inland Counties Incentive Project is designed to cover or provide incentives for both level 2 and DC fast charger installations, or combinations of DC and level 2 installations. It's open to all businesses, nonprofits, workplaces, multi-unit dwellings, public facilities, to apply. It's designed as a first come, first serve, with just 2 noted exceptions. There's a minimum investment of 35% toward properties that are within disadvantaged communities or low income communities. We'll talk about that here shortly. And there's a minimum investment of 25% to unincorporated areas within the project as well. Those will be the only exceptions to the first come, first serve to ensure that those minimum investments are met. We want to announce that the applications will begin to be accepted on May 18th. Currently, that window for the project to open is set between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. that day. Once open, it will remain open and available. The incentive project landing page, where the application on May 18th will open up, is linked in this deck, which again, as Peter noted, will be distributed tomorrow. I do want to note that as we approach May 18th, near that date. We will narrow that open window a little more precisely for you. I encourage you to check back as we approach that on the incentive project landing page, where there'll be updated banner information at the top, informing you of the launch window. Next slide, please. So the Inland Counties Incentive Project focuses on 13 counties across California. They're listed here on your screen. And again, will be in the deck that'll be distributed to all attendees and registrants tomorrow. That really kind of covers from Butte through Yolo, so going south to north from Imperial, up through the valley, around the Sacramento, larger Sacramento metropolitan area, and across North Bay into Napa and Solano counties. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there is a minimum investment of 35% into disadvantaged or low-income communities as part of the project. The project definitions for those are sites in census tracts that are in the 75th percentile or higher of CalEnviro Screen 3.0. And by definition, according to AB 1550, census tracts at or below 80% of statewide median income. Next slide, please. So looking at those 13 counties, the available funding by technology is shown here. It's about $17.5 million for the project in total, but varies greatly from county to county. As with all of CALeVIP projects, the funding amounts are designed to help achieve 30% of DC fast charging needs and 50% of level 2 needs currently based on EBI Pro version 1, and taking into account existing infrastructure within those counties. And again, this will be distributed, so the exact numbers for the counties will be available to all attendees and registrants. Next slide, please. So I want to focus a little bit on applicant eligibility, applicant eligibility requirements. Applicants do need to either be the site owner or have site owner authorization to install. There is a required document called a site verification form. We'll go through in some detail later. That is required of every application that really gets at meeting this requirement. Applicants or applicant organizations need to be a business, nonprofit organization, government entity that's based in California or have a California-based affiliate. Those organizations that are required to register with the California Secretary of State do need to be registered, and that is verified by CSE as part of our initial verification process. Those organizations that are not required to register with the California Secretary of State, additional documentation such as deeds or local business licenses and other documents may be required for verification. As I noted, all applicants are required to submit a signed site verification form within 5 calendar days of your online application submittal. And the information in that site verification form, particularly the installation site, must match the online application form. Next slide, please. So of the $17.5 million available for incentives across the project, for level 2 rebates, it breaks down, as you see on your screen, with a base rate of $3,500 per connector, or up to 75% of project costs, whichever is less. There are 2 adders that are available to level 2 EV charging in the Inland Counties Incentive Project if the site is located in a disadvantaged community or a low-income community, or both. There's an additional $500. If the site is defined as a multi-unit dwelling, which is 3 or more units within a structure on a site, there's an additional $2,000 per connector. We can turn to the next slide and look at the DC fast charger rebate levels. As with recent prior CALeVIP incentive projects, there are 2 tiers of rebates for the DC fast chargers. Looking at the first tier, 50 kilowatt to 99.99 kilowatt power delivery. For, excuse me, for sites that are located outside of disadvantaged or low-income communities, the rebate is $30,000 for DC fast charger, or up to 75% of total project cost, whichever is less. If the site is located within a disadvantaged or a low-income community, or both, the rebate is up to $40,000 or 75% of total project costs. For DC fast chargers that deliver 100 kilowatt or greater, those rebates are $60,000 and $80,000 for the general market and or disadvantaged low-income community, respectively. Next slide, please. So here we would like to get a sense from the audience, what type of electric vehicle charger are you interested in applying for? Please take a moment to answer the question. Okay, just another moment, and we'll go ahead and close this poll. All right, I appreciate everybody's participation in that. And just looking quickly at the results for that, we've got about a quarter of those who have replied to the poll indicating a level 2 charger, a little less than a fifth, just a DC fast charger, and a significant number, about 60%, indicating that there's an intent to apply for both level 2 and DC fast charging on a site. When we talk about the minimum maximum number of chargers per site, and we talk about combination applications later, there'll be some important information there based on this. So again, thank you for taking the time to reply to the poll. We'll go ahead and get back to the Inland Counties Incentive Project presentation. So the charger site limits in the Inland Counties Incentive Project, of course, a minimum if you're DC or level 2 of just one charger, of course. Maximum number of DC fast chargers is 4. For level 2 connectors, that maximum is 10. So this is different for those of you that have recently participated in the Peninsula Silicon Valley Incentive Project. A change from past projects as well, if you're applying for a combination DC fast charger level 2 application, there is a limit of 4 level 2 connectors on those applications. These are the charger limits, or the rebate limits per site. It is not intended to be a limit to the size of the installation you build at the site. Additional chargers can be installed. This will not be eligible for additional CALeVIP funding or incentives. Next slide, please. Okay, turning to some of the equipment eligibility requirements. Across the board for level 2 or DC fast charging, the equipment does need to be new and installed at that site for the first time. It does need to be on the CALeVIP eligible equipment list. I will note that as various manufacturers work in developing new products, that list is updated from time to time. So it can change over the course of the project. And equipment can be changed on the applications. So the requirement for the connector type for level 2 is the SAE-J1772 connector. For the DC fast charger, the requirement is that the DC fast charger has both a CHAdeMO and an SAE CCS combined charge system connector on each DC fast charger. Network capabilities include things like remote start, remote diagnostics, data logging. And there's a minimum 2-year network agreement required with each or for each level 2 charger, and a minimum 5-year networking agreement required for each DC fast charger. The level 2 chargers are required to be capable of 6.2 kilowatt or greater per connector power delivery. and the DC fast chargers 50 kilowatt or greater. Again, with those two tiers that we went through for the rebate levels, distinction at chargers that provide 100 kilowatt or greater. There's a requirement for level 2 EV chargers to be Energy Star certified. That's not applicable to DC fast chargers. For either level 2 or DC fast chargers, there's a requirement for at least 2 forms of payment being accepted, and in some form of credit card payment, whether that's at the site specifically via mobile app, phone, other. What we do want to note, as this project launches in May of 2021, and the installation of the level 2 chargers, DC fast chargers, will occur sometime after that. There's a possibility that the requirements of Senate Bill 454 requiring credit card readers on newly installed DC fast chargers after January 1st of 2022 will impact the project as well. That bill requires level 2 electric vehicle chargers installed after the 1st of January 1st, 2023 to have the credit card readers. And of course, all of the installed equipment, level 2 or DC fast chargers, need to be approved by a nationally recognized testing laboratory program. Next slide, please. So switching from the equipment and looking at the installation site requirements specifically for DC fast chargers, as with all CALeVIP projects, we're looking for the site to be well lit, secure, and that it's in compliance with federal, state, municipal laws, ordinances, rules, codes, and regulations. For DC fast charging, that site does need to be publicly accessible at all times. That means it cannot be in a gated area that's closed to the public at any time. Eligible sites for DC fast chargers are those that are listed here. When evaluating the site is eligible or not, we look at the primary use of the site being one of those listed here. And again, this will be distributed and is also available on the Inland Counties and Center Project landing page that is up and linked in this deck. Next slide, please. So we'll look at the same requirements, but for level 2 chargers. The first is the same, that the site itself needs to be well lit, secure, and in compliance with federal, state, local laws and standards. For level 2 chargers, they are required to be shared use. They would not be dedicated a single charger to, say, a single employee at a workplace, for instance, or a single charger for a single resident in a multi-unit dwelling. Eligible sites are much more expansive for level 2 than for DC fast charging, generally in commercial sites, public facility sites, multi-unit dwellings, workplaces, light duty fleets. Curbside is also allowed for level 2 as it is for DC. It just needs to be located in a block, the same block as one of the other eligible site types. Basic rule for the level 2 is that as long as the site is not single family, it generally would be eligible for level 2 rebates under the Inland Counties and Center Project. Next slide, please. Okay, second of our poll questions. Now seeing the different site types, we're curious, what kind of property are you most interested in bringing the EV charging to? I'll give you a few moments to select one. Again, the primary that you're thinking of bringing the EV charging to. Okay, everyone could take just another moment to go ahead and complete this if you have not. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the poll. Great. So thank you everyone for participating in the poll. It looks like most of the installations are planned at commercial locations, which can include quite a bit. Workplaces just under 20%, multi-unit dwellings around the same, some public facilities, libraries, parks possibly, and then some other facilities there. So again, thank you for taking the time to respond to the poll. We'll go ahead and switch back here. Okay, as with all CALeVIP projects, there is a rebate cap limit. And with 13 counties, it does vary a little bit depending on which county you're in. And this is on the dollar amount of active applications. Those are applications that are in a funds reserve status where an applicant organization is working on designing the project, procuring the equipment, and making the installations, commissioning the equipment. And it's once the application is completed, approved, and paid, then that application no longer counts against the application cap. And that application cap is defined by the tax identification number, or TIN. And in the counties listed in the top row here, that cap is $320,000. And then the counties listed in the bottom row, it's $640,000. And without looking back at the available funds per county, it generally breaks down that the counties listed in the top row, there are lower levels of funding available in those counties overall, and those in the bottom row, there are more substantial funds available, again, based on the need for EV charging in each of those respective counties. Let's go ahead and go through an example of how these rebate cap limits work. So using ABC Company as an example here, we can make an assumption that they are in the situation that they file 3 distinct applications in Yolo County, again with that $640,000 cap we just looked at. Let's say their projects are for $200,000, $260,000, and $180,000 for a total of $640,000, taking them right up to that active cap. They can submit additional applications, but those applications will be skipped over as they've reached their cap, and until they finish and receive a rebate for at least one of the projects, those additional applications would not be able to be considered in Yolo County. Again, the cap is on a per county basis. So in this example, this would not be limiting ABC Company's ability to file applications in Butte County, for instance, or any of the other 12 counties besides Yolo. Let's say that ABC Company completes their project for $200,000, receives that full reserved amount of $200,000. At that point, the applications counting against their cap drops to $440,000, and they could either file a new application for or see one of their previously filed applications considered for up to $200,000 in new funds in Yolo County. Go ahead and move on from there. What can the incentive funds be used toward? It's fairly expansive as long as it's associated with the EV charging installation. It's the EVSE or the EV chargers themselves. It's any of the installation costs, whether labor and materials, again, associated to the EV charging installation. Electric infrastructure upgrades related to that EV charging installation, things like the utility service order, different utility service order costs, planning costs, engineering costs. Energy storage, again, if used to support the EV charging. Things like network agreements, warranties for services and parts, and project management costs to actually implement the project. I want to note importantly with this project that all of these eligible costs can be incurred on or after March 17th of 2021. That's the date when the incentive project landing page went up for Inland County's incentive project. I do want to note that any costs that are incurred from that date to a time before the application has moved into funds reserved for that specific site, the costs are incurred at the applicant's own risk. That would mean if costs were incurred and through review of the application, the site was determined ineligible, or the site or the application fell outside of the available funding based on the first come first serve queue, that those costs would not be rebated through the Inland Counties Incentive Project. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide and take a look at some of the ineligible costs. There are a few. The first is that permit and inspection fees that are required by law are not able to be rebated under the incentive project. And then of course the installation materials, equipment, improvements for of other costs for a project that's not related to the EV charging. So none of that would be eligible, of course. And then in participation with other either state or regional incentive programs, programs that cover infrastructure, make ready, etc. Those costs covered by those other programs would not be eligible for a rebate under the Inland Counties Incentive Project. And then finally, solar panels would not be eligible. Those are funded through other mechanisms, the California Energy Commission, other programs. We'll go ahead and take a look at one of the very key requirements that we mentioned early on in this, and that is the site verification form. This is downloadable on the Inland Counties Incentive Project and directly from the link that's embedded here in the presentation that'll be distributed tomorrow. Cannot stress enough that this application is required to be submitted within 5 calendar days of when you make the online application submittal. If it is not submitted within 5 days, the application will be canceled. Finally, with this, the information that's provided in here must align with the information that is provided in the online application. Installation site address, for example, must be precisely the same. Next slide, please. After an application is submitted, another set of required documents are around what we call the evidence of permit or utility submittal. This occurs 60 calendar days from the funds reserve date. And we'll go through the exact process of applying, going through initial verification or review, getting funds reserved, and then 60 days from calendar days from that funds reserve date, all applicants are required to either submit evidence of permit submittal, which would include a copy of the permit application, a copy of the permit plan set, that's the full set of plans required to support the application, and then if required, which typically is the case by the permitting agencies, a copy of payment receipt for that permit submittal, indicating that it's been accepted in. I want to acknowledge that with the ongoing various public health orders and the impact of prior public health orders, that we recognize the disruption of service at various municipalities and permitting agencies may exist. And then, for example, they may be taking initial application submittals on a scheduled basis several weeks out only. We understand that with indication that that's the relevant case for your application. Say, for example, you're applying for an apartment community in a certain city in Yolo County, and that city was scheduling out 4 or 5 weeks in advance the appointments to submit the application. It is simply an indication to CSE, whether it's a screenshot, an official email from the city indicating that, or showing these requests in the slot to make that submittal. We can take that into account But what I do want to stress is that the completed application itself and the fully completed permit plan set will still be expected. That's within the applicant's control to complete. Turning to the evidence of utility service design, that's the other option that could be submitted. Again, that would be required at 60 days post funds reserved, and that includes a copy of the utility service application and completed plan set, again, of sufficient detail to support that application. We'll go ahead and turn to the next slide and go through the process here a little bit for DC fast chargers or combination DC and level 2. The first step is to apply online. Doing so, selecting the equipment that you'd be implementing or installing, and then again within 5 days submitting that site verification form or SVF to ensure the application does not cancel. After the site verification form is submitted, in step 2, Center for Sustainable Energy will review the application and what we call an initial verification to confirm all the eligible categories from applicant, installation, site, etc. Step 3 is for CSE to reserve the rebate, move your application into funds reserved. There's notifications that are provided, your application dashboard changes, transactional email is sent giving you that exact on that date. And from that point, you have 15 months in total to complete your project. But again, as noted, from that point, you have 60 days going to step 4 to complete the evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal. Continuing the process, let's look at step 5, which requires the applicant to upload the required documents, which we'll go through that list here shortly. That's all done online, and once submitted, CSE reviews. I will note that the system works where you can upload those documents but not submit them, so you can ready your full submission. It does require you as an applicant to not only upload them, but press the button to fully submit them for starting of CSE's review of them. Optional on DC fast chargers and combination applications is anytime from funds reserved up through 8 months, 240 days post 240 days post funds reserved. An applicant could elect to request what we call a milestone payment of up to 60% of incurred cost at that point, 60% of the up to 60% of the value of the total rebate. There's a minimum of at least the design engineering invoice, permit, and the assigned application that are required, but other documentation could be provided in support of the milestone payment, and other costs can be shown to be requested there. And then finally, whether the milestone payment is done or not, step 7 is submitting all of the documents and completing the project in total, and then receiving the final, either the single payment or the final payment. We'll look at the level 2 only process next. It's very similar with a couple noted exceptions from the DC fast charger or combination. Step 1 is the same, to apply online, and then again within 5 calendar days provide that site verification form to avoid the application canceling. The initial verification that is performed in step 2 by CSE to ensure all eligibility requirements are met. And coming out of that in step 3, the funds are reserved. And here you have a 9-month period from funds reserved to complete the level 2 electric vehicle charger installations at the site. Again, 60 days in step 4, 60 days from that funds reserved date, you do need to meet that evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal. It needs to be within 60 days. It can occur anytime, anytime before that as well. Finally, there is no note here. There's no milestone payment option for level 2, but you can at any time upload all of your documents. Again, click the submit button to submit them for CSC review, and upon that completion of your project, CSC would approve it and issue the incentive or rebate payment. We'll go ahead and continue on here. Next slide, please. Thanks. We're going to go ahead and shift a little bit from some of the project requirements and process and take a look at the online application process itself. So getting into that, I want to give you a few application tips to help make you successful with this. The first is to avoid submitting multiple applications for a single installation site. We encourage you to submit the maximum number of chargers that you're planning to install on the site on an application. If less funds are available for your project than you've requested or need, we still recommend submitting your application. It's possible through the implementation of the Inland Counties Incentive Project that various installation projects may discontinue moving forward for one reason or another, and funds could become available for your project. We'll look at, on the next slide, a few CALeVIP requirements to applying online. These are very important to ensure that you don't engage in practices that would unfairly disadvantage other applicants and lead to a situation where your application or those applications you file on behalf of a client could be canceled. The first of these requirements is that unique login credentials are required for each person submitting applications. We do not allow sharing of login credentials across various team members of a single organization. CALeVIP does not permit submissions by bots or automated processes, and we reserve the right to cancel applications that uses any method that could possibly disadvantage other applicants. We encourage you, if you have not already done so, to go ahead and sign up for a CALeVIP account in advance. The link to do so is here, or if you were to go to the calevip.org homepage, it can be found in the upper right corner. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into the application, you'll recall from the process we talked about step 1. On the actual application, that consists of selecting the equipment. And that's a few steps that are there. The first is that the installation type needs to be indicated. As you'll recall, we talked about the eligible site types for DC fast chargers in level 2 earlier in this. And this is the point at which you're indicating which site type you are. Again, that site type selection should be based on the primary use of the site that you are going to do the installation on. If you have any questions about this, there is at the end of this there are information lines for you to seek questions, and we can take some of those at least as well at the end of this presentation. So in selecting the equipment, you'll select the make and model, the number of connectors per charger. That's all done through pick list to help make sure that you're meeting the requirements of the project. You'll select the quantity of chargers. Again, you can select the full quantity of chargers you install. It will calculate the rebate just on the maximum that are eligible in the Inland Counties Incentive Project. You'd indicate the charger installation type, whether it's just net new chargers on the site, whether you're building on a stub out, whether you're replacing chargers, or building on a full make ready that was put in. You will also need to select the network provider. We recognize that you may not know the network provider at the time of application. That's okay. There's an option to indicate that, but I do want to draw note to the fact that there will be a requirement to enter a contract with a network provider for network services before there can be any approval of rebates. Moving on to the next step, which is acceptance of the project requirements. I want to encourage everyone that's listening today to review the project requirements ahead of time. Those are available in the Inland Counties Implementation Manual, which is linked here and which is available on the Incentive Project landing page on the right side of that page in a download section. Some of the topics that are included in those requirements and detailed in the implementation manual include the authority to apply for the site, the voluntary submittal of personally identifiable information that you'll be providing in the application, consent to CALeVIP or for CALeVIP rather to share that information with other incentive program implementers, for instance. And with that, you'll need again to accept the project requirements and then comply with those to receive your rebate. Here you click continue. We can move to the next step, which is to actually get into completing the application itself and submitting it. So the first thing that's of importance here is that under CALeVIP and the Inland Counties Incentive Project, the applicant organization is the organization or entity that is going to receive the rebate. As well, that entity to receive that rebate is going to need to be the entity that incurs those costs, that has invoices they pay to demonstrate those costs and then to be able to receive that rebate. The applicant organization can be really business, public entity, nonprofit. You'll need to provide the organization name, the tax identification number, and those should be clearly directly associated. The applicant organization address, and then an indication of the relationship to the site, whether you're the owner, third-party electric vehicle service provider, or contractor, or other that is submitting the application. Most of the application questions here are going to ask, that are on the application, are going to ask you to answer from the perspective of the applicant organization, as we just talked about. So I encourage you to make sure that you're doing so when you fill it out. Next step in submitting the application includes acknowledgement of these 5 declarations, again, answering from the applicant organization perspective. And they are dealing with bankruptcy, legal actions threatened or pending, loan defaults, and outstanding judgments against that applicant organization. We'll take a look at the next step. Still with the application completion submittal, we're asked for information who is the primary point of contact. That is the application manager, the individual that is managing the application. And we just need basic contact name and contact phone information there. Taking a look at the next piece of information to be required to submit the application, very critically, it's the installation address. We want to note that the installation address cannot change from what you submit. It needs to indicate the site. We do recognize some sites have multiple addresses, but we encourage you to identify that site address as precisely as possible and provide that, because we're not able to change that post submission. For that very reason, you need to ensure that you enter that address correctly and accurately. All the components of that address are listed here that you'll be required to input. That includes things like the nearest cross streets as required information. Move on to the next slide. You'll also be asked to provide some basic installation details. For example, which business or organization is physically closest to the chargers, whether or not the site is on tribal land, or if it's a multi-unit dwelling, if the site includes affordable housing, whether or not the site is publicly accessible. There are also some additional questions we'll ask you. Go through a few of these on the next slide. They pertain to various research aspects of CALeVIP, and that's The existing need for the electric vehicle chargers, if a fee is going to be charged for their use, any information on that fee, who will own chargers, who will operate the chargers, indication of the total number of parking stalls that will be dedicated to electric vehicle charging as part of the project. We can look at the next slide. And here, this is a continuation of that. We really want to stress that as electric vehicle chargers are eligible to generate low carbon fuel standard credits, we'd like to understand how those are factoring into the installation or the decision to move forward with the project, and who will be claiming those credits, whether it's the owner of the electric vehicle chargers, the equipment manufacturer supplying the EV chargers, network provider who's providing network services, another third party, whether it's not known or decided at the time of application, or whether there is another type of organization that would be claiming the credits. Can look at the next slide. Thank you. So as we've mentioned at several points in this, the site verification form is due within 5 calendar days of application submittal. So after you file your online application, this is a view of what your application dashboard would look like. The transactional email that comes to you as well, that will also remind you of this. This is the portal that you can use to upload that site verification form, again, within 5 calendar days of when you file the application itself. We strongly encourage you to have those site verification forms completed in advance of your filing so that you can easily meet this time frame. Next slide, please. So continuing with the required documents, again, the site verification form, as we just looked at, is the first of those, first of many here. To meet that 60-day evidence of permit or utility submittal, there'll be those documents we detailed earlier that are required to be submitted. A signed application form will be required, design invoice, copy of the permit from the city, county, or their permitting agency for the installation, copy of the equipment purchase invoice, copy of the installation purchase invoice. Those invoices and or associated documentation needs to indicate that they have been paid. Final inspection card will be required for each of the applications. 2 photos of the installed equipment showing that it's operational. Photos of the equipment serial numbers for each piece of equipment, each EV charger that's installed under the project. Copy of the network agreement indicating the minimum term that's required. That's 2 years for level 2, 5 years for the DC fast chargers, and if applicable, a copy of the utility service order. I want to note with the Inland Counties Incentive Project, there is an optional or voluntary invoice template that we would encourage you to consider using for your design invoice, your equipment invoice, your installation purchase invoice. That template's shown sort of in the thumbnail here and is linked on this slide deck and is available right now on the Incentive Project landing page. Use of that template creates greater efficiency for the review team and can possibly speed review of your documentation and receipt of your rebate payment. All of these documents are examples of these, and ways to ensure that you submit these properly are supported with the sample supporting documents that is linked here and again is posted on the Incentive Project landing page. I encourage you to reference that and ensure that you're submitting this correctly the first time so that we can get the funding in your hands as rapidly as possible. Next slide, please. There is a requirement for an installation data form to be completed. It's an online form that becomes available once you've submitted your application and site verification form. That form has a number of questions that cover various aspects of the installation process from early procurement and permitting all the way through. So you can access that as soon as your funds are reserved. And we do encourage you to kind of complete that as you progress through your project, all the way from initial conception, design, through the commissioning. It's a savable form as well, so you can complete that as you go. Next slide, please. So coming to the end of this, we wanted to kind of highlight a few key takeaways. The first of those takeaways is that, again, the applications will open up on May 18th, sometime between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. As we approach that date, we'll update that information with the banner on the site. So we encourage you to look back as we get nearer to May 18th on the exact window that we will open the project applications. We went through the list of eligible site types, and if you have one of those sites and you're within one of the 13 counties in the Inland Counties Incentive Project, we encourage you to apply. All applicants are strongly encouraged to complete the site verification form in advance of applying, have it ready to submit within 5 days. We encourage you to ensure that your information is entered accurately, that you have the organization name, that is the rebate recipient, and the organization that will incur the costs, input correctly on the online application form and on the site verification form, and that they are one and the same. Installation address as well needs to be entered correctly. The last point I wanted to emphasize is that under CALeVIP, there is a requirement beginning on September 1st of 2021, that is this year, for the use of EVITP, or Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, certified electricians consistent with the AB 841 requirements. Note that with this project opening May 18th and application processing and reviews starting after that, there's potential that some of the initial applications will fall into the requirement for meeting this EVITP certified electrician requirement. And as well, later applications are increasingly likely to need to meet this requirement. Next slide, please. So as we approach the project, we encourage you to stay connected on CALeVIP. Linked here is the California Energy Commission's docket 17 EBI 01, where you can submit comments at any time. It's always open. View various submitted comments. You can download past presentations, and you'll be able to download this presentation and the recording of this presentation in due time. We also encourage you on the CALeVIP.org website at the bottom to go to the persistent sign up banner and sign up for the email listserv to ensure that you're getting the latest information on CALeVIP, the Inland Counties Incentive Project, and the other incentive projects. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Peter as we enter our question and answer session.
Yes, if everyone could just make sure that they are entering the question in the chat box, that'd be great. We have a number of questions to get started. And Andy, I'm going to combine a couple of questions, but the first one is, what is the definition of a project? That's part A, and part B is, please define site. So if you could answer, what's the definition of a project, and please define site.
Sure. So the definition of a project is I'm assuming that the request is project defined as the EV chargers being installed. So a project is the permitted installation of electric vehicle chargers on a piece of real property. The definition of a site, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull that up, and I think I can post that to all in here. I'm going to give a couple of examples of it to help illustrate it as well. A site is a piece of real property that is designed, generally commonly held, managed, designed for a primary purpose. And again, I'll put in a precise definition in the comment or chat for all to see here momentarily. Examples of a site could include an airport, regional or international airport, or a university. So looking at those as a site within a university campus, for instance, you may have various use areas. For example, lecture halls, administration buildings, dormitories, sports fields. But the site is defined as the university overall, which is, again, designed, organized for the primary purpose of higher education and associated ancillary sporting arts type events. I'll go ahead and post that definition in here during this, and we'll ensure that that's also distributed when the deck goes out.
Okay, next question is, we are a university, is the limit per application or per site?
So is the limit per application or per site?
Yes.
I'm assuming that the question is asking how many chargers can be installed on a site. And the limit is per site. We do look at sites on a continuum. So sticking with a university example, again, they may have multiple use sort of areas that are on that site overall. For example, again, a sports complex, gymnasiums in one area, dormitories in another. But again, we look at that as a single university site. When that site is over a certain size or built to a certain density, we look at allowing multiple applications on that so that it's more consistent with other smaller development, other smaller sites, different development patterns. So when you think of a university, an airport, or what I would typically characterize as large sites that may be hundreds of acres in size versus, for example, a small neighborhood community shopping center that might be 6 or 7 acres in size, we do allow multiple applications on those large sites. Generally defined as sites that are larger than 5 acres in size. For very urban areas where the site falls under 5 acres in size, but contains developed floor area that exceeds that, it's about 217,000 square feet. We could look at that potentially as a large site as well, and eligible for multiple applications.
Great. Next question is the charge or rebate per project location or per organization?
The rebate is per charger, right? So that's the rebate is associated per charger. The rebate limit, if we're referring to the 10 cap, and I'm maybe reading into the question here, that is per organization.
Next question is, can we change equipment maker models if we need to after the project is submitted?
Yes, equipment make and model may be changed after application if needed.
Next question is, can you explain more on the minimum investment of 35% for DAC and 25% for unincorporated?
Yes. At a inland counties incentive project level, there is an intention to invest a minimum of 35% of the 17.5 million and disadvantaged those properties that are defined as either disadvantaged communities or low-income communities. So if a property is located in a census tract that is at or below 80% of various state area median income, that would qualify as a low-income property and count toward that minimum investment. As well, if the site was located in a census tract that was in the 75th percentile or greater CalEnviro screen threshold, it would be defined as a disadvantaged community. And again, the rebate going to that would count toward that investment of 35% of the 17.5 million of the total project.
Next question is, can you clarify the EVITP certification does not apply to any current award projects, only awarded after September 1st, 2021. Is this correct?
The EVITP requirement for the Inland Counties Incentive Project will apply to any applications that become funds reserved on or after September 1st, 2021. So any applications that move into funds reserved before September 1st, 2021 will not be subject to the EVITP requirement.
Next question is, are mixed fleets that are mostly light duty EVs but may include MD and HD EVs eligible?
So light duty fleet EV charging is an allowable use under this. If the primary use of the chargers meets that, then it would be eligible. I'm not sure of the breakdown from the asker of the question, but again, the primary use of the chargers needs to be one of those eligible uses, and light duty fleet is an eligible category.
Next question, combining two, there is many EVSE providers. Can you comment which EVSE is better for hotels, for office buildings, for apartment complex, etc.?
So there is technical assistance available. I would encourage that question to be submitted and we've got the Inland Counties Incentive Project email that'll be distributed here. We're happy to help to answer that question or to understand the precise nature of the need. All of the listed eligible equipment and the eligible equipment guide for CALeVIP meets the CALeVIP requirements and can receive the rebate.
And this is Brian with the Energy Commission. If I can just add in on that we also have a tool on the CALeVIP website called CALeVIP Connects that is really aimed at letting stakeholders or potential applicants go on here, and it's like a kind of a phone book Yelp style where you can click on a category such as a manufacturer or EVSP and view their little profile of what they offer and have a direct contact with someone that knows about CALeVIP as well. So it's aimed to help you reach out to multiple entities and do your own research a little bit easier.
Next question, and Brian, I'll direct this to you. Why do different counties get different or double the cap space as others?
So cap space, I believe that's referring to the tin cap, the maximum amount. It plays into how much funding is available for that county as well. So we try to make sure that there's a amount that is going to be fair to have multiple entities applying. We don't want just one entity having all the funds in one region. And so we set a cap that is relative to how much funds are available in that county.
Next question is, will this webinar be available on the CALeVIP website after today? And can you comment about both the attendees and registries getting a copy of the material? Andy, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yes, the deck itself, the presentation here itself, will be distributed to both registrants and attendees tomorrow. The recording of the presentation will be distributed to both registrants and attendees approximately a week from tomorrow. And both will also be posted to the California Energy Commission docket that is linked in this deck for visibility to all the public, whether registered or attending this webinar or not.
Next question, is it okay if an applicant is a plaintiff, not a defendant, for a civil lawsuit?
I will defer that question, Brian, to you if you're still available.
Yeah, so every application in its process has to answer some declarations about legal lawsuits or bankruptcy in X amount of years and etc. And we want everyone to be honest, as you know, it will be found out eventually, but it's not an automatic cancellation. It's if you do have something going on, it's a let's hear more about it. And so we really want to make sure that we're funding projects that are going to be here for a long time. And so we'll just want to hear more about what the applicant's situation is, and that we'll make a determination at that point.
Next question, on combo applications, what is the maximum DCFCs? I see the maximum of level 2s is only 4 connectors. Andy, do you want to take that?
Yes, on combination applications or single DC or just DC fast charger applications, the maximum number of DC fast chargers is 4 under the Inland Counties Incentive Project. The distinction for the level 2 that was noted in the question is if you're applying just for level 2 at a site, the maximum is 10. But if you're applying for level 2 as part of a combination DC fast charge installation, that drops for the level 2 from 10 to 4.
Next question, how do you submit evidence of EVITP certification? Andy, do you want to take it?
Yes, we'll be providing more guidance on this and resources on this as that requirement comes in closer to that September 1st, 2021 date. But generally, it would be submitted in the Inland Counties Incentive Project as additional documentation with your installation invoice, as it would include essentially an affidavit from the electrical contractors affirming that they have used the requisite or employed the requisite number of EVITP certified electricians on that job. It would include copies of the EVITP certificate for each of the EVITP certified electricians on a job, and that would be combined with the installation invoice submittal for the Inland Counties Incentive Project. That will be verified with a EVITP organization lookup by CSE referencing those certification numbers.
Next question, can you clarify and maybe Brian will hand this to you, can you clarify DC rebates award amounts? If a charger is a CHAdeMO and CCS that can be charged 2 vehicles at the same time above the 62.5 kilowatts, what is the award? Does each port get a rebate?
So I believe that's referencing something we've announced in the past of what we're changing to, and that requirement and that rebate style will not be incorporated in this project. It's likely to come out in our Alameda County project in Q4 this year, where we are switching to a active connector rebate in the future. As of right now, our rebates are tied to, for fast chargers, to the physical charger, which each charger still must have a both CHAdeMO and SAE connector. So our rebate again is we have 2 splits, chargers under 100 kW and chargers over 100 kW. And then there's also whether it's in a DAC and or low income community as well. So if a charger is over 100 kW and has a CHAdeMO and an SAE, say it's in a DAC, which is our highest amount, that's an $80,000 rebate, and it would be a single rebate whether it can charge 1 vehicle or 2 vehicles simultaneously at this time. Again, that's changing 2 projects from this one at our Alameda County project.
Great, thank you. And Andy, next question. Our agency requires that we go through a formal bid process for purchasing and services. So we cannot be specific on that we would be using a specific vendor in the application. Is there a way to apply without specifying the make and model?
A great question. So the make and model is required input information for the project. So that would be necessary. I do understand the public contracting requirements, and I think CSE can offer, or CALeVIP, we can offer an official communication indication that the application is not tied to the specified make model of equipment in any fashion to help with that procurement process. If there's follow-up that's needed on that, happy to take additional questions, or again, take that more specific question that can be submitted to the project email that'll be available, shown here shortly.
Yeah, to expand on that as well, part of the reasoning, again, is because we need to know, are you applying for a fast charger versus a level 2, as the rebate amount obviously is greatly different, as well as there's different site type requirements for fast chargers than a level 2 that can be anywhere. As previously mentioned, you can change your charger selection later on. The 2 things I wanted to point out are, 1, changing equipment is not a eligible reason really for an extension if needed later on. So really the planning needs to be going in as much as possible, as well as for entities that do have to do a RFP process. We really recommend that you have that drafted or started today as early as possible. Again, every application has a ticking clock on how much time you have to complete an installation, for level 2s being 9 months and fast chargers being 15 months, and both having a 2-month check-in on if a permit has been submitted or not. And so we understand that there are processes that need to happen, but we just ask that you do as much groundwork and lead time as possible so that you're ready to hit the ground running when you have your reservation started.
Next question, Andy. Do L2 fleet chargers qualify?
Yes, light duty fleets are eligible to apply for level 2 electric vehicle chargers as the primary use. Those chargers is with any in a CALeVIP, those level 2 chargers are required to be shared chargers, not dedicated to a single fleet vehicle, for instance.
Great. Next question regarding tin cap. You had counties grouped together in different funding caps. Is the cap for each county or is for the county a single group? If we apply to Butte and to Napa for funding, is our combined cap $320,000?
Great follow-up question. It's per county indicated at those amounts on a per county basis. So Butte, 320,000. Not all 7 or so that were 8 that were combined in there.
Okay. Next question. Will declaration of legal processes be ruled out if they do not pertain to funding issues or incentive programs?
I'll just say again that everything's a case by case, so we need to hear more about it, and we don't just have a blanket response to each one. So if you want to reach out ahead of time to CSE, we encourage that, but we do need to hear more about the situation first.
Next question. Andy, if a city wants to install chargers in several parking lots, is the chargers limit per site or is the limit for the entire city entity?
It's not per the city entity. If they've got multiple sites, the site definition was added to the chat. It's per site, not entity. The rebate cap, the rebate cap, the active rebate cap and cap is per organization.
Okay, question here. I am a owner of hotel. Do you have a recourse for owners of businesses having qualified installs?
Hotels are an eligible site type under level 2 or DC fast charging is part of the Inland Counties Incentive Project and are encouraged to apply for the rebates. If I'm misunderstanding that question, please submit a follow-up.
Next question is, Brian, can you stack CALeVIP funding with utility funding?
The answer is yes and no. So I encourage to reach out to CSE ahead of time to hear exactly your situation that you're looking for. For the most part, we do stack with most POU and IOU projects. The ones that we do not stack with are a program that is mandated by how many chargers or connectors that they can install. Meaning, if I own a utility and I got approved that I'm allowed to install 1,000 connectors and not one more than that, we will not partner with those programs. If my utility said or got approved for $100 million of investments and there is no limit on how many chargers or connectors get installed, then yes, we will partner with those. The goal here is to partner with programs that we can leverage each other's funds to get additional chargers out of the projects and programs. When you partner with one that is set on exactly how much they're going to deploy, we're not deploying any additional chargers with that. and that's the ones that we would like to try and leverage elsewhere.
Next question, Andy, can you expand a little bit more on the project should ideally be in terms of planning, design, procurement, and permitting with the applicants is submitted?
Sorry, Peter, I might not have heard that. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Yes, can you expand a bit more on where a project should ideally be in terms of planning, design, procurement, and permitting when the application is submitted?
Thank you. I understood that a little better. Yes. At time of submittal, an application should be at least conceptually thought out for the installation site. The technology that's to be installed known, basic due diligence on possible power point of connection is encouraged. Property owner authorization is necessary at that point of application and the site verification form completed. And the procurement process sufficiently set up or enabled to allow design and engineering to begin immediately post funds reserved, so that within 60 days, a completed permit, utility service or utility service application, along with a complete design engineered set of drawings, can be provided to meet the 60-day evidence of permit or utility submittal. So at a full notional level with a degree of site review indicating design, likely design, and ability for that project to go forward should be done at the point of application. I'll open that, and Brian, if you've got anything to add there, I think could be useful.
Yeah, this is kind of my big topic I always try and bring up, that as much as you can do now, you should. There's so many things that come up in the EV charger installation industry that might be out of your control. And our timelines are very aggressive as they are. Permitting processes have been getting better, but there's still a lot that don't comply with the AB 1236 streamlined law. So one, reaching out to your permitting jurisdiction as quickly as possible to see what they're going to require. Are they streamlined, or what's it going to really take to get permitted? As Andy said, you should be conceptualized where, we want these type of chargers, these quantities, and we might be going with this entity. Signing that site host agreement and not negotiating after you have your reservation made. Those negotiations sometimes can take a long time. So as much as you can get pre-locked up and say it's all contingent on rebate approval, that'll save time. As well, California is coming into fire season later on. So planning everything as much as possible and as early as possible is going to save time, where when we come up to the crunch of, are you hitting your 9 months or 15 months, you're not going to miss your rebate timeline. As well, with COVID having shortages right now in supply chains, really doing your research to make sure your chargers are going to be available, or any other items you're going to need. So just as much as you can do today, tomorrow, yesterday, we strongly encourage it.
We may have covered this, but are the tin caps per project for those counties, or a cap for all projects combined for each county?
The tin cap is associated to each organization by their tax identification number and within each county. So 320,000 in Butte, the other counties listed in that category, 640,000 in Yolo, and the other counties listed in that tier. But it's organization by organization within county.
Next question, are timeshare projects with deemed owners treated as a condo complex or a hotel? Do you impose any ADA requirements as part of the approval? Ryan, do you want to take that?
I'll start and then Andy might be able to do it better. So private residences are not eligible for funding, single family homes. MUD, multi-unit dwellings, maybe Andy can expand on that definition, but again, our charges are shared use, meaning it can't be designated to a single residence or a single vehicle or driver. It to be open to everybody in that site. Timeshares, I'm going to defer to Andy. That sounds a little bit to me leaning towards the private residence side, but I'll let Andy go there.
Yeah, so the first question is, would it be eligible at all? And that depends on the construction type of the timeshare, whether or not they are what we would call multifamily. If we were going to look at them eligible through that lens, they would need to include physical construction that has 3 or more units in each of the in the building or each of the buildings on the site. If it's a timeshare that is essentially comprised of duplexes, for instance, it would not be eligible. Now, looking at the question of drawing a distinction between the site as, I'm going to say, a multi-unit dwelling and a hotel, we would want to look at the specifics of the management of the timeshare to evaluate that. Again, we look at, for DC fast charger eligibility under those sites, we look at the primary use of the site. So we would need to look at the sort of structured management on truly how that timeshare works, to see if it would meet our definition, which is in the Inland Counties Incentive Project Implementation Manual of hotel. I'm happy again. Yeah, sorry. There's an email that's available on I believe just the next slide that will for the Inland Counties Incentive Project email line. We would encourage whomever asked that question to follow up very directly with that, and we can look at specific information on that in advance of application to give you a very specific answer.
I believe that's the questions that are listed. If anyone wants to submit any further questions, that would be appreciated. I think they've been covered. So as a reminder, this webinar will be emailed to both attendees and registrants tomorrow. And in a week's time, the recording of the webinar will also be mailed out. The project will be launched on May the 18th, and look for a window to be provided shortly before the May 18th timeframe. Unless we have any further questions, that would conclude the webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.